Good morning. We'll go ahead and get started. It is 10:01. I'm starting up roughly on time here at OLLI. I'm Jacob Yarrow. I'm the director of OLLI, and we're just absolutely thrilled to have y'all here from our spring course preview. I always get confused because we say winter here, and I moved to California 9 years ago from Iowa, and I then leave in winter here. I guess this is spring now. You know, it's all the kids have already moved. But this is a really remarkable time for OLLI. We have the most members we've had in years, like 500. About that. Class participation has similarly been really robust this past year. So that's thanks to all of you. Thanks for being a part, being a member, coming to classes, spreading the word. So many of you are great ambassadors for OLLI and get involved in lots of different ways. Many of you are volunteers. Our board members are here today. Members of our curriculum committee who are just getting started and trying to figure out next year's plans. So if you can get more involved, please let us know. And also just like do it. Come to things, say hey to people, get to know all the great folks that are involved with OLLI. Have a list of things that I wanted to mention to everyone. Sonoma State has a new president as of January 20th. Yeah. We're not allowed to call him new anymore. President Spagna is really enthusiastic about OLLI. That's what I wanted to share with y'all. He is my boss, so I see him regularly. And in my very first meeting, I was able to share the good news about OLLI. And he is familiar with OLLI from other campuses he's worked on and appreciates the value of lifelong learning, appreciates the value of this community and the way that we're able to invite people on campus to be a part of Sonoma State, and we want more and more people to be a part of Sonoma State in all the ways you can be a part of it. So he is deeply committed to this, and that's an exciting place to start with a new president, for sure. We've been making efforts to make sure that our members are aware of lots of campus events, and my colleagues that work on this program with me have done a great job of trying to push out through the OLLI emails different things that happen on campus. There are so many things happening in Sonoma State. It can be kind of tricky to find them and figure it all out, different lectures and talks and fascinating things. So we've been making efforts there, and I've seen y'all show up for a number of things that we've been telling you about. So that's great. People look out for that. We've also been able to arrange some Green Music Center connections. I'm also the director of the Green Music Center, and I've seen many of you at Green Music Center events, and we'll continue to find new ways to involve all the members as sort of a part of your membership to have some access to Green Music Center things. And we're also working on a special promotion with Cinnabar Theater, who does shows here on campus. So you'll start to see some things about Cinnabar Theater in the coming week or two, I would guess, about getting involved with some of their upcoming shows that happen on campus in Ives Hall. So lots of ways to continue to be involved. I think those were the messages I wanted to share. Thanks so much for being a part of this. We're at a remarkable time in history. So being part of community, being part of public education is really important to us here at Sonoma State, and y'all are part of it, and we really appreciate that. Next up, we're going to hear from Linda Reed, longtime OLLI teacher, board member, is going to tell you some more things. Thank you, Linda.
Thank you, Grace. Welcome, everybody. Grace wanted me to say a few words about the clubs. So we have two clubs. We have the Cinema Club. How many of you attend the Cinema Club? Great. And we have the Art Club. How many of you are signed up on the Art Club? So the Cinema Club is taught by Barbara Spear, and she once a month will show a movie, and there'll be a discussion. And so, and I'm chair of the Art Club. We have a team. Our Art Club team meets 2 or 3 times a year, and our team members are Heidi and Pat Kavanaugh, our own Pat Kavanaugh, and Connie Cotting, and Nanette Simmons, and Nanette Garner, and Osha Hayden. And so if you would like to join us and be a part of our team, let Grace know, and she'll let me know. What the Art Club does is, I'm an artist, but we don't paint. Okay, so what we do is we go to exhibits. And we go to exhibits in San Francisco, to all of the museums, and right here in Sonoma County. And being a member means that your name is going to go on an email list, and I am going to send you email notices of our events. And then you will either attend or whatever. So love to have you. And Ollie's wonderful. We love Ollie. Love the numbers being up. Thank you.
All right, let's get started with our classes today. We have 9 classes coming up that will start the first week of April. And first, we have Feuding Icons, How the Founding Fathers Built a Nation by OLLI with Nick Chandler.
Thank you, Grace, and thank you everyone for being here. The title of my new course, I think, is a good summary of the thesis or the main idea I'm going to try to convey during our 6 weeks together. How the founding fathers built a nation through arguing. Now that immediately brings up a couple of problematical questions, I think, in many of our minds. First of all, how can you build something positive, like the first modern republic in the Western world that eventually was destined to become the greatest power of the Western world, economic, militarily, and otherwise? How could you create something that efficient and that effective and that long-lived through arguing? We would tend to think that the arguing all the time would be a divisive force, a negative force that would tear down the early republic and make it impossible for us to fulfill our national destiny. But the founding fathers were a querulous bunch. They were ambitious, they were jealous of one another, they were frequently petty and backbiting. So how do you create something magnificent out of such a witch's, that's probably politically incorrect, out of such a negative force field? That's one problem that the title of the course poses, I think, for us. The second problem is that it conflicts with our sort of mythological understanding of the founding fathers. I think we like to think of them all as being these 18th century Enlightenment figures with powdered wigs and silk ruffled shirts and knee breeches, steeped in philosophy and languages and history and so forth. And above all, we tend to think of them as being rational men. But we're going to see that was not always the case. And let's see, do we have our clicker here? We're going to see that they didn't always act so rationally. Here we see some of our famous founders, and it's a bit disappointing in a way to realize how much so many of these figures hated each other. I mean, the most obvious quarrel that was a long-running feud that lasted 10 years was the fight between Alexander Hamilton, depicted on the left of the screen, and Thomas Jefferson on the right of the screen. But it was this arguing between these two intellectual giants that allowed something greater to come out of the dispute, other than their petty and spiteful carping at one another. We're going to see how that works, I think, in the course of our time together. Here we see Hamilton on the left, and the character that plays Hamilton, Lin Miranda, in the famous Broadway hit. And he's going to be really at the center of our story, because I would argue that just about all of these critical ongoing debates involve Jefferson and Hamilton in one way or another. The other figure that we're going to spend quite a bit of time on is John Adams. Jefferson has this funny line about John Adams when he's corresponding with James Madison, when Jefferson is in Paris and Madison is still back in America. And Jefferson writes back about what a cantankerous fellow John Adams is. And Jefferson says, Adams hates the French, he hates the British, he hates Franklin, he hates Hamilton, he hates everybody. And that's fairly accurate. And interestingly enough, at the end of their lives, these two figures lay down the sword and become the best of friends again during their last 5 or 6 years. And that may be a key to understanding why something good can come out of arguing. Again, we'll flesh this out in the course of our time together. Patrick Henry is a little bit lesser known, but of the founding fathers, but we all kind of remember that line that he had, "Give me liberty or give me death." So we would think he would be a hero, beloved of all the founding fathers. But here's the quote from Jefferson to Madison. Henry was avaricious and rotten-hearted. He speaks without logic, without arrangement. What we have to do is develop so much for this plucky band of brothers being wanting to overcome the injustices of the British Empire. Aaron Burr, again, a lesser known figure, unless you saw the play Hamilton, in which case Burr figures centrally in the play. Burr, of course, is the man that's going to kill Alexander Hamilton in a duel in 1803, I think it was. Burr is another one who carries on constantly in these long-running vendettas against the other followers. And what makes Burr kind of unique of all the founders is that he truly is a man without virtue. He's a scoundrel, and others all have redeeming characteristics. I think you have to search pretty hard to find anything that's redeeming about Burr. Thomas Paine, another one, the chief propagandist of the American Revolution, a masterful hater. See how he manages to transform his hatreds onto the printed page and become one of the most important figures in the revolutionary period. So with that, I hope that you'll see that even though this is a long time ago and seems to be a distant world, you'll find a lot of relevancy in this course, I think. Okay, everyone, hope to see you.
Next, we have all roads lead to Rome, 2,500 years apart in the Eternal City by Lane Austin.
Everybody, and welcome to my offering to OLLI this time. All roads lead to Rome. I want to invite all of you to come with me to one of my favorite places, the city of Rome. Has anybody ever been to Rome? Okay, good. Well, whether you've been there or not, I think we'll have a good time looking at some things that are familiar and some things that are unfamiliar. We're going to start, of course, with ancient Rome. And we'll be looking at this view of Rome a number of times. The saying is that one lifetime is not enough for Rome. So that means 6 meetings. We're not going to see everything. We're going to meet 6 times and we're going to touch on a lot of different elements. Starting, as I said, with ancient Rome. We'll look at some Etruscan works of art. We'll talk about the founding of the city of Rome. We'll look at the famous Mouth of Truth, which dates from the time of the kings of Rome. We'll look at some Greek art that influenced the art of the Romans. And every time we meet, we're going to take a virtual field trip. So our first virtual field trip will be to the Park of the Aqueducts, which is actually just on the outskirts of Rome. And it's a place that hardly any tourists ever go, but it's a fabulous place. This will be a place where we can see Roman architecture at its most impressive. Imperial Rome, that is the time of the emperors, will show us some very well-known monuments. Anybody recognize that one? Yeah, we all know that. The Pantheon may be less well-known, but still a very famous building. And we'll also be looking at some works of architecture that are less well-known, and we'll be looking at lots of Roman emperors. Some good ones, like Marcus Aurelius here, and some very, very bad ones. Caracalla, always scowling. Our field trip this time will take us a little further away from Rome to Ostia Antica, which is the ancient port city of Rome. And this is an opportunity to see how ordinary people in the time of the Roman Empire lived. Because Ostia Antica was a working man's town. Our third meeting takes us to the time of the early Christians in Rome, and then into the medieval period. Rome was a huge city in the ancient world. It was 1 million people at least. Some people say 2 million population in the city of Rome. In the early medieval period, it fell to about 12,000. So Rome was a very different place in this era. We're going to visit the catacombs. We'll talk about some early Christian symbolism, and we'll be looking at mosaics and frescoes and churches that attracted hundreds and thousands of pilgrims every year. And our field trip will be across the Tiber River to Trastevere. We'll look at a set of frescoes that almost no one who visits Rome has ever seen. Now, Renaissance Rome is a little more familiar to most of us. I think we recognize some work here by Michelangelo, maybe by Raphael. The angel there may be a less familiar artist, Melozzo da Forlì. So we'll be seeing familiar and unfamiliar things, and we'll also, for our field trip, climb the dome. I'm not sure how many of us could climb the dome. I did, but I was only 19. So we're going to have a virtual field trip climbing Michelangelo's dome. Our fifth meeting, we'll talk about Baroque Rome, which is the style of art that's still most common in Rome. If you walk through the city, it's a Baroque city, even to this day. So we'll look at work by Caravaggio, Bernini. We'll, of course, talk about St. Peter's as it looks today. And our field trip takes us to the talking statues of Rome. Anybody know what they are? These are very interesting sort of political statues. And then finally, our last meeting takes us beyond Baroque. We'll look at art in Rome from about 1700 to the present. That's a big span. We will look at obelisks, sculpted figures with fig leaves. Why fig leaves? Modern art, like that big sphere there. We'll look at some bones, and our field trip will be a look at strange things in Rome, of which there are a great many, including this house with a huge mouth. So I invite you to join me visiting Rome. We'll have a lot of fun. We'll see a lot of art, and I hope to see you all there. Thank you.
Thank you, Lynn. All right, our next class is Global Romantic Revolution, a call to feeling and a call to action with Anthony Rizzo.
I have notes. I'm jealous of your ability to speak without notes. Thank you for being here today. I initially wrote that I felt like I had the easiest task maybe of anyone here, which would be to interest people in romanticism. But after seeing all these wonderful courses, I feel like we all have it pretty easy. I'd love to sign up with all of them. I also feel like on Wednesdays, there's a great complimentary series. Professor Emily Ray's course in ecofeminism leads perfectly into my Wednesday afternoon course. So grab some lunch in between, sign up for both. So why romanticism? Well, it's only the movement that gives us most of our ideas about self and society, art and the artist, about childhood and nature, about rebellion and revolution, about the modern and the past, and about what makes life worth living. So, right? End of spiel. It wasn't one movement. Much like the civil rights movement in the 20th century, there was multiple movements that burst on the scene after the French Revolution, which, to place it in today's timeline, occurred right after the American Revolution. And it stormed through the 19th and 20th centuries, and really right up until today. Geographically, it began in Western Europe. It spread throughout all of Eastern Europe and the Americas. And as with anything that big, it meant different things to different people at different times in different places, of course. And as with anything that lasts that long, it winds up changing over time. And as with anything that popular, it gets reduced for mass consumption. That there. But the question, what did the German romantic poet Novalis mean when he said, the world must be romanticized? I feel like that sounds like a good time, but how? As the great romantic song goes, the fundamental things apply as time goes by. Heart over mind, imagination, intuition, passion, inspiration. The idea that it's nature against society works in some cases. The idea that it's self against society works in other cases. Actually, if we could go back one, that guy, that guy's really out there, right? He's the self against society. He's not even, there's no society depicted. He's looking down on the world. That's a romantic archetype, right? The haughty, aloof genius looking down on the world. But if we could go to the next one, thank you so much. This is romantic too. This is a romantic painter depicting a bunch of bleeding romantic figures out in nature reading to each other. Fun for the whole family. Right? It's very social, as well as being rooted in nature. And also, if we could go to the next one, this is romantic too. This is Eugène Delacroix's Liberty Leading the People. Not from the French Revolution, as is often mistakenly thought, but from the Revolution of 1830, which you could think of as an expression of French Romanticism. So this is not kind of dropout escapist art. This is politically engaged, very social art. So it seems that Romanticism has some contradictions within it. Renounce society and leave it. Also change society by revolutionizing it. It's like back to nature, back to the future. This is why my course is subtitled A Call to Feeling and a Call to Action, because it's both of those things through politics, philosophy, and art. The main title, Global Romantic Revolutions, points to the fact that it was a global movement. And if I might add, another shared feature of all romanticisms is that they stood together against dehumanization through industrialism, through the next one, mechanization, and through technologization. They stood against in many ways, technology or the technologization of the human sphere. I wonder if we could possibly relate to that. Many of them thought that poetry was the royal road to the future, a better future, and not just written poetry, but the act of poetic creation through ways of seeing, through ways of feeling, and through ways of living. Some of them said that we are all. And they said that society is trying to pound that out of us. So I propose that we explore how to restore that magic to us together, because I actually do think that it's true. The world must be romantic. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Anthony. And next, we have I Wee Wee, and hopefully I pronounced it right, but if not, Linda Reed can tell me. This is I Wee Wee, Rebel with a Cause, and the instructor is Linda Rebel. Linda Reed. Sorry.
Hi. I'm still Linda Loveland Reed, and, so we're gonna look at Ai Weiwei, and, let's go. So Ai Weiwei, is a rebel with a cause. He was born in 1957, and, he is, can be bombastic. Somebody said, did you read his, new, biography? Don't read it before you come. This is just going to be a 2-hour class, and we're going to talk about this very amazing man. He produces his work all over the world. He was born in China, and he lived in China when, of course, until he was in his 20s and so on. So we'll be looking at all of that. This is Ai Weiwei with his father in China. They lived through the Cultural Revolution. His father was an intellectual, and he was exiled to labor camps. And actually, 5 years of that time, they lived in an underground dugout. And so that was a very difficult time for the family. Ai Weiwei is going to become an activist. And he is going to, his art is going to make statements, and he fights for the human rights, and those who are oppressed. And his father was a very remarkable man and had a huge influence on him. His father was a poet and a scholar, and so I was very close to him. So this clamoring that Ai Weiwei did living in China for democratic values gets him imprisoned. He's imprisoned, he is beaten. In fact, later he will have a brain hemorrhage from this and need surgery. But after he gets out, of course, they have confiscated his passport and he's not allowed to leave the country. But what Ai does is which is what he always does, is he makes an art piece out of this. So he makes 6 huge life-size dioramas and of him in prison, of everything that happens to him while he's there. While he's in prison, he is not ever left alone. There are always 2 guards with him, whether he is in the toilet or wherever, sleeping, wherever. But he has to sneak these huge dioramas out of China, which he does, to the Venice Biennale. And he shows these at the Venice Biennale. The Venice Biennale is the art exhibit in the world. And he becomes very famous. This is one of those that he made here. I find that Ai Weiwei, even though his art is made to make a statement, but it's always beautiful. What you are looking at here is the sunflower seeds. Now, he had 1 million sunflower seeds made out of porcelain, done by 1,600 artisans that he paid to sculpt these sunflower seeds so that each one is unique. And what you are seeing here is they cover the floor of the Tate Modern in London. And people could actually go out there and walk around on them. And what he's doing is he's making a statement about the mass production made in China. He also is making a statement. He says every single seed is like every single person who is unique, who is special, and should be looked at that way and not as a mass product for a country. So well, the other thing about Ai Weiwei's work, it's always humongous, it's always huge, and it travels. You know, this particular sunflower seed project, of course, was done in many countries. So this is called Law of the Journey. And for this one, I visited 23 countries and spoke to hundreds and hundreds of refugees. And what this is a very large inflatable boat covered with 258 faceless rubber images of people. And so, of course, he's making a statement on the global refugee crisis. And then this particular piece, of course, this was shown in Prague, but is shown different places, but he also does this piece again, only in a different way. And again, I think there's a certain beauty with each one of his pieces. He's really quite amazing. And I will say also, he can be controversial. Anybody who is making these huge statements is going to step on toes, and he can be a little rough around the edges too. You might remember the bird nest. This was at the Winter Olympics in Beijing in 2008. That was that extraordinarily beautiful building. And that building, Ai Weiwei was the artistic consultant on that very gorgeous building. So altogether, what we have is we have a man who wants to make statements to try to have democratic values throughout the world. This is an artist that we need to know, and I hope to see you on April 8th. Thank you.
Thank you, Linda. All right, next up, we have Introduction to Ecofeminism with Emily Ray. These are some updated dates. We're just pushing the class back 1 week. So we will start on April 29th and then go 1 week later.
Thanks, everybody. We are going to be talking about ecofeminism, and I think it'll be obvious why today it's vital to have this conversation. So if you're not familiar, ecofeminism is putting together environmentalism and some of the logic that guides environmentalism and some of the logic that guides feminism and where they intersect in a discrete set of ideas and movements that we call ecofeminism. Ecofeminism takes its start by assuming that there are kind of twin forces of domination that are exerted upon women, which is an argument that we find in feminist movement, and forces of domination and logic of domination that humans impose on the environment. And that can partially explain why we find ourselves in a period of climate crisis and other kind of exacerbations of environmental disaster. So when we look at those two things together, we might see some really critical overlap in some of the reasons why human beings might think that we have some kind of position of total control or absolute use, however we wish, over the environment. and why there are some logics that suggest that women are appropriately or rightfully dominated by other members. And we can also find that patriarchy and some of those ideas do not necessarily always benefit men either. And so how do these forces come together? And how do people try to see that the liberation associated with women and liberation from patriarchy more broadly is also related to the way that we can improve our relationship with the rest of the living world and non-living world, rocks and other things that we might consider inert. And how the two of those things addressed together can provide the basis for a more liberated society and better relations with each other. So we will talk about what do these things really have to do with each other and how did some people start to see those overlaps? So ecofeminism starts to emerge around like late 1970s, the 1980s. Especially the 1990s was a big robust period of people publishing theoretical and philosophical works and also incorporating ecofeminism in their direct action and their activism. But the movement started to get really bogged down, especially around the 1980s and 1990s, in a bunch of internal arguments and debates that kind of stalled out progress. Some of the central debates were about gender essentialism. Is there some enduring feminine or masculine or man and woman that maps onto biology as some kind of truth? And some people argued yes, and some people argued no. We'll get into the source of those debates and how that really splintered the movement. And then there's also these kind of other directions that ecofeminism pulls in. So some people took a more spiritual, neo-pagan approach to thinking about Mother Earth, Gaia principles, and what kind of politics and social ideas followed out of that. And some people really forcefully pushed against that and were more interested in bringing Marxism and feminism together. That also occurred largely in the 60s and on. And so they start to have disagreements about what it means to actualize the principles of ecofeminism and what directions they start to pull in. By the time we get to the end of the 90s, there's no real resolution on some of these challenges. And a lot of people started to think that ecofeminism is both a principle for action and a set of philosophies was kind of at a dead end. Some people also wanted to bail on it altogether and still continue to feel like it has poor representation of activists and thinkers from the global south. Does it say enough for everybody? And some people started to talk about ecological feminism as a way to kind of bypass the problems that were tangled up in ecofeminism. So we're also going to look at what it looks like today. There's a lot of movement to kind of revitalize ecofeminism as a philosophy and a basis for action, especially since environmentalism, as we'll talk about in our next week, is environmentalism is often addressing the way that environmental disasters, environmental practices, and climate change disproportionately impact women worldwide. Women are often at the basis of the kind of land-based labor that gets displaced and radically changed, and that they are often part of what we'll probably be seeing what we call today climate change migration, which might eventually get the status of refugee. It may not. We'll see how UN debates proceed with that conversation. But women are often disproportionately impacted, and women are often disproportionately at the front lines of environmental activism, especially in what we call frontline communities, communities that are experiencing climate change before other communities are. So coastal communities or communities that are located near oil refineries or other kind of sources of industrial pollution. And we'll take a look at how some of the activism has played out in specific examples. We'll also talk about why ecofeminism is always just underneath, but it's never really talked about or taken as seriously as other ideas around environmentalism and feminism. So why is this often just not at the forefront of conversations that I think we probably should be having right now? I don't know if you're aware, but the climate crisis is not going exactly as so why is this conversation maybe not bubbling up as much as we think it ought to? And then we can talk about how it can be used to meet the moment. How are people today starting to pick up ecofeminism again, refresh it, try to address or resolve or move through some of those sticking points. And what does it look like to be practiced both as through activism and through scholarship today? So I hope you'll join me for more than just me talking at you, but a really good conversation, because mostly I get to hear from all of you having this conversation, which is the most enriching part. So thank you, and I look forward to seeing you.
Thank you, Emily. Next, we have 50 years of San Francisco jazz, 1916 to 66. The instructor is Dave Redlower, but unfortunately he couldn't be here, but it's for a good cause. He is he's giving a class in another OLLI, but we have a video to play.
San Francisco entertainment has long embraced bold innovation, naughty novelty, and striking originality. Hi, I'm Dave Radlauer, happy to be joining OLLI Sonoma for the first time. And I've been presenting the colorful history of this area's jazz and popular music on radio for 4 decades. Yet in preparing for this course, I've been blown away all over again by the breadth, depth, and colorful local music history of our region from 1916 to 66. San Francisco and the Bay hosted a vast outpouring of talent in music, song, dance, and entertainment on several distinct vectors and in discrete scenes. And I'll describe and unpack a dozen major music situations, each illustrated with about a half dozen clips. For instance, the rowdy Barbary Coast Vice Quarter is well known, of course. It was a hotbed of gambling, drinking, opium dens, prostitution, and rough trade of all kinds dating back to the 1860s. And music for dancing in the music halls brought New Orleans style music to San Francisco before 1920. The Fillmore District, or Western Addition, was known as Harlem of the West between 1945 and 65 for its vibrant African-American community life and commerce and thriving 24-hour jazz, blues, rhythm and blues, and bop scene. The Jazz Casual television series was produced by Ralph J. Gleason at KQED Television all through the 1960s. The talented impresario and San Francisco Chronicle music columnist for 25 years offered an intimate performance and interview platform for the greatest names of jazz during the 1960s. Around 1940, many of you know about this, Lou Waters and his Yerba Buena Jazz Band launched a worldwide traditional jazz movement, reviving early jazz style, claiming to play no song published after 1930. And the trombonist in that band, Turk Murphy, became a legendary San Francisco band leader, nightclub owner, and institution in his own right. Women were always welcome singing around the Bay, particularly the classic blues, sung by Barbara Dane, who we recently lost, Lizzie Miles, who came up from New Orleans, and Pat Yankee, who also served 20 years singing with Turk Murphy. Club Hangover was the foremost Dixieland jazz venue on the West Coast during the 50s, presenting legendary African-American veteran musicians 6 nights of the week with a Saturday night radio broadcast heard across the West and Canada. Blues music thrived in Oakland and the East Bay and nearby unincorporated Russell City. I'll tell you about it. Russell City was a small, proud, off the grid, mixed minority community near Hayward, a hotbed of the West Coast blues style, but it was razed to the ground by the local authorities in the mid-60s. Perhaps the most intriguing and exotic of these now lost San Francisco entertainments were the astonishing Chinese nightclubs. Beginning in 1938, Forbidden City and a half dozen other Asian-themed nightclubs, the Kubla Khan, Chinese Sky Room, Club Shanghai, and the Dragon's Lair offered a generation of American-born Asian performers new means of expression. And Forbidden City became synonymous with this style of entertainment, entertaining 2,200 guests for 2 shows nightly. It offered the most elaborate floor shows, the most risque semi-nude entertainers, and the best Asian American singers and dancers, setting the gold standard for Asian clubs. Here's a short clip, typical of what you'll be seeing in the course.
Forbidden City was a curiosity, it was a novelty, it was exotic, it was well-known, it was universally well-known.
Quite a scandalous place to be going because you had showgirls who were only partly dressed, I mean, with skimpy costumes and so on. And so this would be kind of a daring place to go.
Every day is a different kind of fun.
Yeah, it's a lot of fun.
Yeah,
It was there.
every day is
Like a
different kind of fun.
three-ring circus every day.
No kidding.
No kidding.
Yeah.
There's something going on.
Always something going on. Wasn't this or that, this or that.
Of course, what we did in the 30s and 40s were shocking to the Chinese community and confusing for the Caucasian people.
I've never seen Oriental do this type of, of singing and dancing. This was something new for everybody, even for ourselves it was new.
No one took us very seriously until the Forbidden City opened its doors. So we said, come on, let's show the world our stuff.
So that's typical of the 50 clips I'll be playing, exploring a dozen such topics. Please join me for this colorful survey of the West's outrageous innovation, bold individuality, and body novelty and entertainment, 50 years of San Francisco jazz and popular music, 1916 to 66. Hope to see you there. Thanks.
Next up, we have Heidi teaching futurism and other isms, art of the early 20th century Europe.
Heidi and I were actually going to do one of those dance numbers, but it didn't allow us enough time, so I apologize.
Years ago, the former director of the OLLI program, Leslie Brodico, nicknamed the classes that where'd you go? Nicknamed the classes that Charlie and I teach together as the Charlie and Heidi Show. I think you can get an idea already of what we do, which we take very seriously, but we don't take ourselves seriously. And before I even start talking about our class, I just want to say how thrilled and relieved and joyful that I am that Charlie's here to join us. Really am. Anyway, so what are we teaching? We're going to be approaching a group of artists, Italian, called the Futurists, that began thinking and working and writing in the early part of the 20th century. The Italian philosopher of that particular era, actually a little bit earlier, made the statement, his name was Benedetto Croce, and he made the statement that Italy was burdened by its past. And as you can see, I don't know where she went, but we've always known about history and about Italy, and what we mostly know about Italy is this 2,000 years of civilization and creativity, et cetera, et cetera. And it's this weight of history that the futurists were attempting to shake off. And how did they do it? Why did they do it? I remember the first thing that I ever heard about the futurists is that they stated in the writings that they wanted to burn down the museums. How can you burn down museums was my thought. But this was philosophically how they wanted to unburden themselves from the past. What we'll be looking at are the other ways that that they actually overcame this almost 2,000 years of Italian visual history, political history, and cultural history. It's a 6 weeks class, and I'll let Charlie now tell you some of the images that we're going to be looking at. I'm also thrilled to tell you that wonderful Kai Boyd at the Rialto Theater in Sebastopol has selected an exhibition on screen that coincides with this class. So we'll talk about that more when we start our classes. So, Charlie.
Great. So I'm just curious, how many of you have even heard of futurists or futurism? Good. Oh, actually a nice number of you, because it's a lot of artists that people don't generally know and they don't understand, or they're not familiar with the names. But this is Bala, who did this dynamism of a dog on a leash. And in 2026, this looks cartoonish to us. But in fact, we're going to talk about what gave Bala the idea create this image of movement within a static image. And he was really looking at famous photographers. We'll go into that a little bit later when we see you in the course. Here's Boccioni with this wonderful title for his painting, "The Street Enters the House." Normally you go out and you walk out onto your balcony and you look at the street. He's getting us to completely turn our ideas around of how art and the world around us looks. This is Giacomo Balla again with this painting called The Street Light. And I put this quote up by one of the most important people in the movement, Marinetti. "Let's kill the moon." So you can see the moon sort of hidden away by this bright electric light. Why kill the moon? Moon is sentimental. Think of Blue Moon and all those wonderful songs that are written about it.
Romantic.
Yeah, where's our friend teaching romanticism? These are the anti-romantics. They really wanted something new. And it's really interesting if you think about this movement. Of course it would start in Italy. Why? Because you can't spit in Rome without hitting something really important, right? There's some great art or something of historical significance. And here they were crowded in by all this weight of art history. These are the brash young men. And I'm using that word specifically because they didn't like women very much.
They were very misogynist.
Yes, absolutely misogynistic to the nth degree. But here are these brash young men who really wanted to create something new while they were being completely crowded in by all this beauty everywhere around them. So one last piece, Boccioni's A Lap. Some of these pieces are going to be very hard for you if you're not used to modern art. It takes a little bit of time to figure out what they're trying to do. But one of the things Heidi and I will do, we'll go through the movements that led to futurism. Things like orphism, which you may not have heard of. Things like pointillism or divisionism. Just think how smart you're going to sound at your next time. Drop these words, and just like that. At any rate, I think you're going to get a lot out of it. We're going to, if nothing else, we're going to look at great art and have a lot of fun talking about it. Oh, here's an example of divisionism, which is subtitled Pointillism. Everyone knows this piece of work, right? So there'll be some old friends interspersed among the new. We'll talk about the post-impressionists and how important they were in terms of a influence on what they were trying to do. Of course, Cubism was a huge influence. And here's orphism, in case you didn't know what that term meant. Sonia Delany is one of my favorite artists. You'll find out why she was so important to me and to the futurists. So hopefully we'll see you Thursdays, 1:30 to 3:30.
Thank you, Haley and Charlie. And our next class is Ancient Greece, the making of Western civilization with Douglas Kennedy.
All right. Making Western. Angelo Sorokas, a comedian, took offense at the way people were pointing fingers at Greece for its public debt. He said that the Greece owed the world $431 billion in national debt. Why aren't the Greeks paying their debts? Hold on, he says. Hold on. Who's not paying their debts? What do we owe the Greeks? Well, I'll be riffing off of Angelo here. Well, let's start with the alphabet. Alphabet. And language. I mean, there are 80,000 Greek words in English. Words like economy or money. In fact, if the Greeks take back their words, we can't even talk about their debt. Of course, they gave us words like crisis and chaos, but that's whatever, that's fine too. Economic talk make you sick? Sorry, you're not allowed because you can't get sick without Greek words, such as laryngitis or dermatitis or nausea. And what did the Greeks give us besides nausea? The Olympics. And that's only the start. How about all institutionalized sports? I mean, how much are the Giants worth? How much are the 49ers worth? How much are the Oakland A's? Never mind. And story. Greek drama. They gave us theater, opera, TV, movies. All this are based upon an understanding of the presentation of story. And all that involved from Greek drama. Let me get my. The Olympics and story. The tragic sense. Drama as a understanding of the human condition. And the comic sense. Comedy as social satire. Think about it. No, you can't think about it. Because the Greeks invented thinking. Reason. I mean reason. They not just used it, they invented it. Yes, we're talking philosophy. What do you feel about reason? No, you can't talk about your feelings either. No, they didn't invent feeling, but they invented the ways in which we talk about feeling and taught us to talk about feeling, to express our feelings in art and literature, our personal human feelings, not just praising the gods, and also to understand our feelings. Wait, I'm talking psychology. Freud and Jung looked to the Greeks to develop the science of psychology. Speaking of feelings, how about love? They invented love. You're not buying that. Okay, they invented the way we talk about it. I mean, the universal terms that we use to describe love. Love, how about love as the binding force of the universe? Hint, platonic love. Well, speaking of Plato, you can thank Plato and Orpheus for something else, for Christianity. At least the ways in which Christianity differs from Judaism. And the opposite thing from the monotheists, something makes them uncomfortable, which is the perfection of the human body. Ideal perfection, ideal beauty, the ideal beauty of perfect proportion. And not only the human body, but buildings. Many of our public buildings still are classical in inspiration. And mathematics. Mathematics is beautiful. Well, they gave us much of practical mathematics and much of geometry. Well, some of you who are mathematically challenged might not want to pay them for that one. But curiosity about the world. They invented curiosity. By what I mean, looking at the world and trying to understand it. And by which gets us to science. Yes, the language of science, but science itself, they invented. So we have science and spiritual thinking. Plato and Aristotle got them both covered. Oh my God, did I mention democracy? Yes, it's a bit messy, but it works better than communism. Which also is based upon Greek ethics and Greek political thinking. Politics, good Greek word. They invented politics. Elective government, check. I mean, look what elective government has given us today. Okay, moving on. Moving on. The rule of law, which they did not invent, but trial by jury, which they did invent, and lawyers, which they did invent, and hold on. Got to keep up with my ideas. I lose track. And all that leads up to civil society. Civil society, which is what the duty that each individual owes to the greater good. Okay, you're right. They had slavery, but they gave us the terms and the ethical understanding that allowed us to abolish slavery. Yes, women were not allowed to participate in public life, but it was on the basis of Greek ideas that they gave us that we have feminism and we have civil rights and we have universal suffrage. How do we know all this? History. They invented history. Well, the study of history. It all comes down to humanism. The understanding that our concerns should be focused on us, not on the gods, but on us human beings. They gave birth to the Renaissance and the Enlightenment. Both of those are humanism brought to the modern world, Greek ideas. So what if the Greeks owe $431 billion in unpaid debts? What do we owe the Greeks? There'll be a collection jar in the back of my car. What is this course about? All of that stuff. Thank you.
Douglas. Our last class is Women in Rock, the first 25 years with Richie Unterberger.
I'm glad to be presenting for the first time at OLLI Sonoma State. My course on Women in Rock, the first 25 years. That will cover the mid-1950s when rock music started through the early 1980s. And I'm glad to be doing this presentation during International Women's Month. The story of Women in Rock is really the story of rock and roll itself, because women have played a key role in the evolution of this music since its beginning and up till today. We will be covering, in the course of 6 weeks, just some of the styles that we will be covering and some of the major performers. I bet, by the way, many of you recognize everybody except one. My first quiz question is coming up. Starting with rockabilly singers in the 50s, girl groups, that is the Shirelles on top. The first style of music primarily associated with women. Women in British rock, Dusty Springfield is up there. From our own area, women in psychedelic rock, the two biggest stars of psychedelic rock in San Francisco were Grace Slick on the left and Janis Joplin on the right. Women in soul music, those are the Supremes. Singer-songwriters, of which women were a huge part of that movement, which started in the late 60s and early 1970s. And women, this is our last class, in new wave and punk music, starting with artists like Patti Smith. So we start with women in 50s rock. Well, I should have saved that quiz question because I forgot I have the answer on the screen here. The point to make is that I'm covering a lot of very well-known artists. We've seen some of them already on these slides, but there will also be room for artists you might not know about or only know their names, who made very important contributions, like the singer on the left, Wanda Jackson, who was one of the greatest rockabilly singers, and that means a fusion of blues and country music that led to the first important white part of rock and roll. Elvis Presley in his early days, Carl Perkins, Gene Vincent, those are some of the artists, but there were good women rockabilly singers. She was one of the best. We have the Shirelles on the right, the girl groups. Their harmonies were influential on many acts, including the Beatles in the United Kingdom, but also behind the scenes, there were quite a few women who were instrumental in the great songs that we associate with artists like the Shirelles and Will You Love Me Tomorrow, co-written by, here's a quiz question, but I bet some of you will get it. Who co-wrote Will You Love Me Tomorrow? A woman, very famous. See, we have a very knowledgeable student base. No mistake. Carole King wrote that and many other hits, some performed by girl groups with her first husband, Jerry Goffin, but there were other women like Cynthia Weil and Ellie Greenwich who wrote quite a few of those hits. Soul music would not be the same, that's a great understatement, without the many contributions of some of the greatest soul performers. We see the Supremes here who had 5 straight #1 hits in the mid-60s, right after the Beatles had invaded the United States, a very competitive time for rock music. I did cover the Supremes and some other women singers like Gladys Knight in my Motown course just a few months ago. But most of this week on soul music and women performers will not be Motown artists. They will be some other artists who were massive, like Aretha Franklin, of course, and Tina Turner, and some others who might not have had huge hits, but were very important, like Etta James. Women of the British invasion. Although the British invasion is mostly associated with guys playing guitars, women played a very important part. Dusty Springfield, I think the best of those singers. If you think, well, what's Lulu doing in the course? She did that Ballads to Serve with Love. Her early material, it's really hot soul rock records. And if you haven't heard those, I'll be playing some of those in the course, not just audio clips, many film clips, some quite rare. Other women like Marian Faithfull going up to Christine McVie, a big part of Fleetwood Mac. Women in folk rock and psychedelic rock, not just in San Francisco, but certainly these two women, the only photo session, this is June 1967, where they posed together, Grace Slick and Janis Joplin. Singer-songwriters, Joni Mitchell, a very big part of that movement. Yes, she did start as a folk musician, but many of the psychedelic and singer-songwriters who were women performers started in folk and moved to rock. Janis Ian was one. But there were others who were not so much from a folk background that broke great new ground in the scope of rock lyrics and expressing emotions from a feminine perspective, like Carole King, who had started writing hits for other people, but became a superstar, and Carly Simon. And new wave women like Patti Smith, you see her with her 1975 debut record, Blondie, fronted by Debbie Harry, Christy Hind of the Pretenders. And also a great development of New Wave was that there were quite a few self-contained rock women bands, meaning that they played their own instruments, wrote their own material, like the Go-Go's and the Bangles and some others that you might not have heard of, especially those from Great Britain. Of course, Women in Rock will be held Fridays from 1:30 to 3:30, starting April 3rd.
All right, that concludes all the courses that are taking place here on campus. Don't forget about our OSHA online courses. If these work better for your schedule or you'd like to take classes from home, we are offering 5 OSHA online classes that you get to take with people from other OLLI. Those classes you do have to register for by March 16th, please. And here are the course titles that we're offering. There in the back of the catalog. The scope is Monkey Trial, Then and Now, Frank Lloyd Wright and Modern Architecture, The Lost Generation, Great Science Stories in California Uncovered. All right, if you would like to register today, we would love to help you out. We have a registration workshop in a computer lab down the hall where we will have multiple people helping walk you through the online registration system, and that is in room 1208, which is out this door, down to the right, and the last classroom on the right. And there will be some folks in the hallway guiding you that way. And
2 more things. This is Grace Gary, folks. How about so much, and Yasmin De Fonseca. For our human assistant. Thank you so much to make all this go, and the last thing I wanted to share with you is, as of this year, Ollie is 25 years old. We're not big days. We're not old enough to take our classes yet, but we're headed there. So we're gonna be celebrating 25 years of Ollie all year long. And thinking some about our amazing history and our amazing future ahead. So look forward to that as we see what else happens in 2026. Thanks so much for being a part of this, and we'll see you at the classes.
I know. A little time.